Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. Hope you're having a lovely start to your week. We're having a lovely start to our week. We just put out a Sheshko Scout. I still don't know how to say his name. Is it Sesko or Seshko?
It's Shesko, apparently.
Do you remember Lens? Lens? Le?
See, if George is telling you pronunciations, then I don't know if I want to listen to it.
When George is giving me pronunciation stuff, that is a concern. We've just put out a video scouting Benjamin from RB Leipzig. So if you want to check that out, patrons and YouTube members, you can check that out. Hopefully you've all enjoyed that. But if you want to check it out, you can also for a free trial on Patreon if you haven't already seen that, which is exciting. I think we're going to do a Yusuf Fofana scouting one as well at some point this week, so stay tuned for that. George, have you heard of him?
Never. New player for me. I'll have to do my homework.
New player to you.
Yeah.
New player to you. You have to think about that one. But yes, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Bhavs, you were hanging out with Charlie Patino just before we start. How was that?
Was I?
You were, mate.
I was. It was.
Drop the name.
Sound lad. It's nice because actually it was a hangout as well. It wasn't like an event, like pre-organized thing where you kind of just get told you're meeting a player. He just kind of turned up, and because I know a mutual of his, Jensen's a very nice lad. He was just walking around with us. It's weird because obviously, if that was me a few years ago, and I was like probably like 16, 17, I was like, oh my god, there's an Arsenal player. Oh my god, there's an Arsenal player. And there was an Arsenal fan actually there who's like a proper hardcore like match going fan. He's like, oh my god, Charlie Patino. Let me. What does Mikel Arteta think? But I was just chilling, play FIFA with him, and he's just a sound lad. He did say a few things. I'm not going to say everything what he said.
What did he say? What did he say?
He just said a few things about his learn about Swansea. I think it's right for me to come out and say what he said. Like, okay. It's a bit.
Sign up to our Patreon if you want to find out what.
yeah. Do you know what I mean? Maybe we keep it behind the scenes. But like, yeah, look, he was talking about his loan, and I just asked him how it was, kind of thing. But it was a very like nice, friendly conversation. It was always like a nice little hangout. And he's a sound lad. He did talk about, I think, his Arsenal thing. He said he's coming back. He doesn't quite know what's happening with his future though. So we'll see what happens there.
Interesting. George, were you hanging out with Alphonso Davies this weekend?
Yeah, me and him.
Is that? I think that is the only Canadian player I know. Oh, no, Jonathan David.
Yeah, we don't talk about him. But me and Alfonso, yeah, we're me and Fonzie actually. He likes to be called Fonzie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, of course. Also over the weekend we had the Champions League final, Madrid versus Dortmund, which was I'm not going to attempt to analyse because I was 4 Guinnesses in. I always think about this. You know, when some people they talk about the game and you're like, oh, how was your experience? They're like, yeah, I had 15 pints beforehand, and then they start telling you about the game. I'm like, how are you analysing the game?
Yeah,
how?
Yeah.
But it was an interesting game. I thought Dortmund, through my bleary eyes, had the best chance in the first half, but then Madrided, didn't they, George?
It's the most predictable outcome, I think, for me at least. You know, it was Dortmund were going to miss some chances with Adeyemi, I think, being their best outlet. I still don't know why he was taken off. But I think ultimately Dortmund had to seal their chances when they were. And when Adeyemi was through, he had to make sure that counted. And as long as you give Madrid time in this competition, they are like no other. They have a certain heritage in the Champions League that you're going to almost know that they will score. So you need to make sure that when you're on top to really push down on the throat and kill them off. And, you know, they didn't. And so that was probably a really interesting point for me. I love the player. I think he actually showed a lot of the reasons why, for me, there's a lot of physical tools there, but also showed why I think he's quite raw as well. And I think some of the decision making that he does need to be tweaked and worked on. But generally speaking, I just think I look at Madrid and I think, how do you guys keep everybody happy? Just generally, I think of the Mbappé news that we got that I'm sure we'll talk about later. I think about their team in general, and it is an outlier, isn't it, guys? Like in terms of them being able to play on the pitch. And I do love, by the way, the Carlo Ancelotti story with it all. I think he's probably one of the most disrespected managers for me when he gets talked about in these all-time lists. And it's not somebody that, for example, I share a lot of football philosophy with, but I just have to respect. Like, he does it a different way. He doesn't care. He's true to his own thing. And he's in one of the most successful managers of all time. Factually. I mean, he's done it everywhere. And his style translates to absolutely every single league. And it's consistent. So it's just something that I think I love for him. I think it's good for the sport for us to see successful managers that break the bend and maybe aren't the exact same as what you see around the world. So, yeah, that was fun.
Pep clones. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, I think with Ancelotti, he's one of those managers who, as you say, George, like if you were talking about all-time managers, he'd maybe be in the conversation, but he, I don't think people would put him definitely second or definitely third or whatever. You talk about your Sir Alex's or whatever. And I'd need to have a proper think about it before that. But at some point we have to start to acknowledge the achievements of this guy. It is absolutely crazy. Bhavs, the Mbappé move. There's been not necessarily a backlash to it online, but there's been a bit of a sort of a conversation about it in terms of it being, what do you want to call it?
It's been a cop-out.
A cop-out type move, shall we say?
KD. If anyone watches basketball, KD's gone to the Golden State. Look, actually, the backlash has been shared by him and Fabrizio. I don't know if you've seen that. You've ruined transfers. Oh, we should have known. We don't want to know this. But then they still follow him and they still check his updates to see what's happened. No, in terms of Mbappé to Real, I see the point of view. I do. Because the whole point of Real Madrid signing him is to do something, is to complete something. But they've won the Champions League. They've won La Liga. They've just won a treble. They were about to win the quadruple, right? So what else you have left to achieve? You've got 15 Champions Leagues. You're clearly the better side in La Liga. Barca are miles behind you right now. They've got a new manager as well. And obviously from Real's perspective in terms of, commercially, signing Mbappé makes a lot of sense. But for Mbappe's legacy itself, you're going to a team full of stars. And if Mbappé wins the Champions League at Real Madrid now, we're going, well done. Like, it's like winning an FA Cup at Arsenal at this point. Because it's the same. It's like, they do it every other year. So it's not like a major achievement. I guess, look, if he had won a Champions League at PSG before leaving, it would have made his legacy that much bit more special. In terms of you're doing something that no one expected. It's a bit, you're going above and beyond. If you win a Champions League at Real Madrid, it's very, very, very much expected. I mean, Dani Ceballos has got 3 now.
Yeah.
Kepa Arrizabalaга's got 2. One at Chelsea, one at Real Madrid. So like, it is. Look, I get his point of view. He wants guaranteed success, and it makes sense as well. I can see the point of view of fans going, look, for your legacy, maybe it's not as big as maybe he thinks it is, but I think he is guaranteed a Ballon d'Or for sure, and I think if that's what he wants, then he's at the right club.
Yeah, I just think, like, we sit here as fans on podcasts and stuff or behind our keyboards. Realistically, he probably doesn't care. He just wants to win. And, moving to Real Madrid is probably the best chance of doing that. I suppose what I'm interested in is the kind of the knock-on effect. And George, interested in your perspective on this. I think there was some comments from Rodrigo yesterday about potentially staying at Real Madrid. Is there any kind of knock-on effect that you can see happening, maybe potentially affecting the Premier League and even potentially affecting Arsenal? Because I look at Camavinga's performance in the Champions League final, and I look at the stockpiling of players that they have. And I just do wonder. I look at that front area, and as you say, they seem to have a magical way of keeping people happy. But I don't know. I look at Rodrigo, and I just think, what do you think?
There's a debate to be had if I'd liked Rodrigo, but I'll keep that separate to answer the question. I think also I wonder if Mbappe would get this backlash if he just moved to Madrid from the off, if he didn't do the PSG intermediate step. Like, I wonder, coming from Monaco and going into the superstar club that you preferred, I wonder if he gets that backlash. I think I have to think that Madrid, but I think they're the one club in the history of football that I just feel break the rules. I mean, look at the entirety of Beckham at the time. How did Beckham and Luis Figo make sense ever? And they did it, and they made it work, I mean, kind of to mixed review. I mean, to be fair, I mean, Beckham started that career in probably one of the toughest times for Madrid when he did come in, and then afterwards, I think towards the end of his time, he really succeeded. But I do believe that there's going to be a knock-on effect. But I mean, also Kroos leaving, Modric potentially staying in midfield, along with Arda Güler, Valverde, Camavinga, Tchouaméni, Jude Bellingham.
There's got to be someone we could get. There's got to be someone.
Like, there's got to be an impact, and I still don't know how Mbappe and Vinny Jr. actually coordinate well together. I mean, I know that Vinny Jr. has been kind of experimented through the middle this season, which, by the way, he's done pretty good at. But I mean, still, he's not a true complete 9, and he's never going to supplement Mbappe in the way that he needs. Mbappe needs a striker that's willing to do some of the dirty work for him, drop deep, fill in, play him into passes. I mean, so it's something for me that I look towards the horizon. I don't know if this summer is when we see it. I think we need a year of gossip and a year of issues and a year of affairs, so to speak, and then maybe the pent up resentment is enough for people to look up to go. But Madrid are that club, unfortunately, and it's why, by the way, I have always felt that our process should lead ourselves to try to think to emulate that, because no matter what, they're a team that retain talent. And, I think Chelsea are trying to do it through a youth pathway, but they're the only club in world football that can actually sustainably keep superstars happy on the bench. And, when we talk about Jesus and we talk about our own squad players about wanting to move on from them, half of the argument is, do they want to stay here because they're not starting and they're not giving the role that they left for? That's been a big argument. At Madrid, that's not an argument.
Yeah, I was listening to Elliot from Arsenal Vision talk about this on a podcast. I think he said something. Elliot's brilliant, and I hope if he listens to this, he doesn't take this the wrong way. But I think what sometimes he does is makes a really quite simple point.
Sometimes
but
it's
true.
It's the best answer.
It's so true, and he's really good at it. He's really good at boiling things down to just the most basic facts. And this is what he said. Basically, he said, "Look, you can spend all your time talking about squad building and pathways and will Smith Rowe leave and will Vieira leave and all the things, where's Nwaneri and Cozy do. We'll have those conversations, and we're going to have those today. But at some point, most of the time, football outcomes are swung by talent. They are. So, there is, and Madrid do this thing where they basically go, it feels to me, they go, who is the most talented person available on the market? Let's go and get them. And it sounds incredibly basic, but actually we spend all of our time, especially in the corners of the internet and, the conversations that we guys have and hopefully people listening like to have, it's hopefully more in depth and trying to understand the game from new perspectives and constantly be learning. But sometimes there is the most basic fact that put talent on pitch, win more matches. When we watch Bhavs, Real Madrid go and win Champions League after Champions League after Champions League, I think it's worth having these conversations and going, can we learn something from that? Can we go, let's figure, if we look at, who's the most exciting player on the market that might be available for Arsenal, I'm sure there's a lot of Arsenal fans.
and Osimhen. Cough.
Yeah, but exactly. But, you say Osimhen and people say, well, how does he fit in? And, the wages, et cetera, et cetera. Is it worth sometimes just taking a step back and going, do you know what? He's the most talented available player on the market. Let's go and get him. Is that, I think there's value in that conversation as well.
Yeah, I think, look, in terms of Arsenal, and George is right, the ambition should be to become the best club in Europe. And you look at Real Madrid Stadium, you look at their fan base, and just the aura around that club. It's on the players they've got, the superstars, everything around them says we're the best club in Europe. And if Arsenal want to get to that standard, they have to, try to replicate every manner of the club. It can't just be signings and talent and just trophies. You have to make everything better. It's like United being the best club in the world next year, and they've got Old Trafford and the roof's still leaking. It doesn't make sense. So look, I think I could a sentiment.
Had to get that in.
Yeah, like, listen, you can't have a water park as a stadium and expect to be the best club in the world. So, but like in terms of Arsenal and trying to get to that stage and just taking tips from Real Madrid, we have to show that ambition in terms of signings. I think that's the most obvious way of looking at it. And it can't just be. I think sometimes as fans we get invested in the process of the players, of like players that we have to settle with them. Like you look at Real Madrid when they had Di Maria and Cohen, they just want Ledissima, and they wanted to upgrade and go and get someone else after that. Those, if it was Arsenal fans, we go, we keep him, he's done all right for ourselves, but if Real Madrid go, no, we can get a better player in the market and just as an obvious upgrade, we're going to go get it. So it's that ruthless ambition. And I think for Arsenal right now, as fans, we're getting used to just being competitive again, right? And I think slowly but surely we'll get to that stage where we're used to competing again, and we know that's a guarantee, and then it's about winning successfully. And I think a lot of it comes down to how the club's going to be after we win the first title. Let's just say we win the league next year. How are we going to react to the market? Because Real Madrid just won the Champions League.
Yeah,
and they go to Mbappé. Right, so can we do that? Can the owners do that as well?
Yeah, I will say something though. I mean, success allows a lot of this stuff to happen. Let's not beat around the bush. I think the reason that they can sit there and say, let's buy X talent to get X on the pitch is because they sit there with being the most prestigious Champions League club to ever exist. And I mean, they do so because they win. And I do believe like there is a certain half of the conversation. Have a look at our Invincibles lineup when you look at Kanu and Wiltor, and have a think about what those two strikers were on the market, by the way, in their pomp. We at one point, I would argue, had one of the best striker departments, period, between Bergkamp, Henry, as well as Kanu, Wiltor in the world. That was frightening. I mean, Kanu and Wiltor could have started at some of the best Champions League clubs in the world at that point, but they stuck around. The point is, when the team is winning, there's a different level of acceptance. And I would even argue, have a look at the David Raya and the Ramsdale knock-on effects of what we're seeing and we're going to be debating this summer. Like I would argue if Arsenal were winning, Aaron would stay. Like, I think, and it's not about keeping Aaron, but it's about understanding even us able to upgrade on Aaron is not a big deal. Us making the decision to do a David Raya in other positions is not a big deal. And those players that we've thought were unreplaceable become replaceable in the starting 11, but they themselves will want to stay because they're at a club that is winning. And that is legacy to players. I do think sometimes players just look, it's a short career, mate. How many trophies have you won? It doesn't matter whether you were a water boy. You're going to be talking about, hey, I was part of that Champions League winning squad. And you know what? Fair play. Yeah, I mean, he's going to do that. And what are you going to say to it? Can you imagine being in a conversation and be like, no, I played for Real Madrid and I was part of the Champions League winning squad. Wow.
And by the way, he did play. Like, it's not like he literally did. He did play. So, yeah, I mean, every player will have their own individual ambitions. But this is what I think. Because there is, what I just said about the, can we just, lean into the Madrid thing? Well, you can't. It's because, as George was kind of saying, it's like, it's all very well saying we want to be Madrid, but Madrid are Madrid. And the reason they can do what they do is because they're Madrid. Yeah. So we have to do it our own way. But this is something that people talk about. Actually, Clive Palmer was on the Ripple Effect recently, and he spoke about, because actually James Alcott, the host, was asking me what to ask him. And I said, basically, do we think that Arsenal can get to that play? Can they be the Madrid, the Bayern that get to the commercial levels, whatever? And Clive was kind of talking about Arsenal much more about bringing North London to the world, and I totally get that. But for me, like, I want our ambition to be commercially bigger, to get to. It's fine if we're North London to the world, but I don't want to stop at North London. I don't. I want us commercially to try and get there. We're in a really interesting position right now in football. We could be sat here in 20 years and say we were the team that caught up to commercially to Man United, to those sorts of clubs, and became the team in London. Why can't we be that? I mean, what is stopping us? We have the owners financially who can do that. We have all these things, but the only thing is we can't yet be Madrid. We can't yet be Bayern. We can't yet be those clubs because we're not quite there yet.
I think part of the debate, right, mate, is actually, I think Clive's point makes you more Barcelona than it does Madrid. And I think it comes down to how you view maybe football to a certain extent. I mean, Barcelona have the whole Catalonia identity. If you really want to talk about North London being a suburban part of your roots and your identity, I mean, the whole call portion of Barcelona and Catalonia and making that your brand has been a thing for them for quite a while, right? And I feel like it limits yourself when you make your roots define you. I think they need to guide you. And I think the big thing that I look for with Arsenal, at least, is when you're starting to become the king of England. And when I talk about being the Madrid of England, it doesn't mean dropping the North London. It doesn't mean taking that away as part of your. Well, absolutely. But I think you platform the club as opposed to platforming a culture. Because I don't think Arsenal personally, and maybe this is just getting a little deep, as an international fan, I believe Arsenal on every level have been the most friendly, diverse club across their history. If you're talking about not just international fans and accepting Americans, like, forget that for a certain point of view.
He's Canadian, guys.
And I'm Canadian. But in terms of even, like, I don't want to get too political, but in terms of accepting people from different races and different cultures, Arsenal have always been a club that historically have been the people's club. In England, and they have been the foreign club in England. I mean, I'm pretty sure we were among the first teams in the modern era to basically almost field an all African American.
Black 11, I think it's the first 11. Time. All 11 without an English player as well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Exactly. So we've got roots in that thing, and that for me should be the identity. Like, I want to be the people's club, and I think there's a certain power. I look at the big sports reveres, Muhammad Ali. They transcended their own culture. They transcended their own roots and they became something more. I think Madrid are something more. I mean, they've got Mallorca, they've got their own Spanish roots. It's not that they don't, but they became global. And I do think that in order to take the next step, especially in today's society, in today's world, we need to become global. So my push is for us to go global.
Yeah, you have to look around and take what you can from every club. But I think Madrid is a good example in some aspects. We have to do it our own way. And this is what I push back. Yes. People say, just do Madrid stuff. Well, you can't, because you can't be Madrid.
Just win trophies.
Just win. Well, hang on a minute. there's only one team that wins it, so let's try and take what we can do from
win
it.
trophies.
Bhavs, just to close this out on this, because you probably spend more time around the club than obviously me or George. I don't know how George would manage that from Toronto, but do you get the sense that there is that ambition to go and be competing? Yes, on the field, but in terms of off pitch, kind of soft factor impact. Do you get that sense?
I think we're getting there. And I felt I'll use the stadium as an example, because look, obviously we made the new stadium back in 2006 and it was amazing back then. If you compare it to the grounds that are made now, like if I've been to the Spurs ground for a concert before, and that is better in terms of facilities, in terms of the experience of a match going fan. And I think part of why Real Madrid have changed their stadium or upgraded their stadium is to do that, is to make it the premier stadium in the world. I think with Arsenal right now is they're trying to obviously fix the outside. They've changed the outside exterior look of the stadium, trying to make it look newer, which is nice. I think the next step is interior, in terms of even like something as little as the speakers. I think the speakers are nowhere near loud enough at the Emirates. If you go to the ground, sometimes you can barely hear.
That's really what's holding us back from Madrid.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like, the experience of like
as an audiophile, you have to appreciate that.
Yeah, for me.
yeah, exactly. But it's just like when I've gone to grounds before, where you could hear the sound just stick inside. Real Madrid got the roof; they're closed now. That will be like a cauldron. I'm not saying we should add a roof to the Emirates, but something like that, having the speakers and stuff like that to make the acoustics loud enough in the stadium, that will make the experience that much more premier. And I feel like we're getting towards that, and every year they're trying to make new things towards the stadium to make it even better and better. Because it's weird, because we're the first club to kind of get a new stadium in England, and now we're not outdated, but you can kind of see compared to Spurs and other clubs, and you got Everton got a new stadium coming as well, how that works out. But in terms of Mikel, even I believe Mikel is a part of that. I think actually a massive part is going to be how we are post Mikel. Real Madrid aren't Carlo Ancelotti. They're not Kylian Mbappé. They're not Cristiano Ronaldo. They're Real Madrid. And so for Arsenal, it has to be we're Arsenal, and we're not just Mikel Arteta. You look at Man United, their whole entire, they're massive club, but it's Ferguson at the point, and Fergie's gone now, and they're not quite the same club. So I want to see how we are, post Mikel Arteta, how we replace him, how we instill philosophy, how the owners are in terms of after our first Premier League, after our first Champions League, how ambitious you are in the market, because we've seen Liverpool in recent eras, very massive club in terms of history and in terms of heritage. They won the Champions League, they won a Premier League title, but there was no massive investment after to go and kick on. And the only club in England that does that is Man City. We know about them and the reported charges and stuff like that, but they don't have the heritage that Arsenal have, or United have, or Liverpool have. And so if we can use our heritage as, history and stuff, and use it to our advantage, but also being ambitious in the current market. And I'm seeing, last year, in terms of last summer, fought for a title, got to 84 points, and we go and sign Declan Rice and Kai Havertz and go and spend records amount of money. So even this summer as well, seeing how we spend, how we sell, and who we go and sign will be a massive part of it. And I think it's a guarantee that we win the title in the next few years. But I want to really see how we are after that title. How the owners want to invest. Is it like, we're satisfied with one title. Too much NBA there.
One ring.
One title, or do we want to go and have like a real era of we want to have 4 or 5 and become that club again? Because Arsenal never had that, have we? or not in since the 1930s.
It's a very important point, and I don't want to gloss over it, because I do think it actually leads into another topic that we want to talk about. And I think when you start talking about eras, Bhavs, in terms of like building the next step, the one thing I will say is I really praised the club for their revenue growth recently. I think Juliet Slot needs to do a bit better about the fan sentiment. I think things like the ticketing, I think these are small things that we can do as a club. If we're going to be the people's club, be a fighter for the people in every aspect of football. And I think that we need to position ourselves that way. I agree with you about taking the next step. I really think that this next window, it's all well and good scouting and looking at youth and making an argument for why a player that we look at is good. But guys, I think that's fundamental. I use the analogy of medical school students and applications. Everybody that applies to medical school is a stud, by the way. Everybody that Arsenal look at right now, prospect or not, is a stud. Desiree Doué, Shesko, Osimhen, whatever the spectrum is, they're studs in their own respective right. So saying no to them isn't saying no to the player and being bad. That's not the same thing. What Madrid do a brilliant job of is, okay, not only do we look at the best ones on the market, i.e. Vinny Jr. when he was there, because he was a prospect, but he was the best prospect we've seen it at Brazil. That's the difference. When I talk about going global, I don't just talk about you have to recruit the Osimhens and the superstars of the sports at the time. Madrid have always been known to get the creme de la creme. They take the next step, and they're not worried about sentimentality. And I agree with you, Bhavs. They're not based on a person, on an identity. And it's because of that globalization. So I think when I talk about Arsenal being the Madrid of England, I hope we keep our roots. I hope that becomes an identity. I love what we've done with Colney. I think the aesthetic things that we've done in and around there are brilliant, by the way. They always show a willingness to improve and never being satisfied. And that's a lesson that I hope we take into both this summer and how we look at targets, how we discuss targets, and how we tackle the moment problem of Arsenal.
Yeah, I think...
And get better speakers.
And get better speakers, crucially. Listen, guys, we've got George and Mike. Next step, speakers at the Emirates. But I think I think you guys make great points. I think, specifically how we move forward. I think there's a question mark around how Arteta manages superstars, which maybe will be, it's probably a conversation for another day, and how, but that's a current issue. But I think generally, I think sentiment is a big thing, as you were saying, George. And I think there's a fan base thing as well here. There's certain players that we get attached to and their stories. And I think we spoke about it with Aaron Ramsdale as a good example. A lot of people are just going, well, we've got to sell Ramsdale. Why? Madrid wouldn't, unless they got a good fee for him. We don't have to do anything. We've got him under contract. We're this nice... I think there's almost a split at the minute where there's some fans who, or some people within the club who are happy to be here, and some fans who are going... But I do think we need a general around the club, including the fan base, bit of a mentality shift around how we look at players, and I think sentiment's a big thing. But another big shift, here's a Bhavs-esque segue here, another big shift will be how we approach the Champions League. And the Champions League is changing next season, which I don't think we spoke about on this podcast, and I also don't think is necessarily informing a lot of the conversation around Arsenal over the next season. So let me just remind you of the format. Under the new format, teams will play 8 matches in the new league phase form of group stage. They will no longer play 3 opponents twice, home and away, but will instead face fixtures against 8 different teams, playing half of those matches at home and half of them away. To determine the 8 different opponents, the teams will initially be ranked in 4 seeding pots, and I think there's graphics of which pots they're in. I think we're in pot 2. Essentially, you're going to play more group stage games. There's also a difference in terms of the Carabao Cup next season, where a seeding system will be implemented that will see teams playing in Europe avoid each other in the early rounds. So potentially, certainly 2 more Champions League games. I think also, if you play those games, you then have to have a knockout stage. If you're not in the top, I can't remember what it is, but if you're not in the top 9 or 10 or something, you then have to play another round before you even get to the knockout round. We might have a longer run in the Carabao Cup next season. So lots of potential here for, pre-season games, all sorts of stuff. So there's so much football. Generally, George, I'll come to you first on this. Generally, we're going to be playing more football next season. We haven't seen from Mikel necessarily yet, or have we? Maybe this is a question. The ability really at the very, very best level, because not to say it doesn't change the team, but at the very, very best level, I don't think we've yet seen from Mikel an ability to really use his squad at crunch time. I feel, and the thing is what's funny is people will come back to you with facts and figures. But I think there's which you could make an argument either way, but I really feel, and maybe that's not fair, but I really feel that always ends up being 14, 15, no matter how many we sign at the end of the season, 21, 22, 22, 23, last year.
I think that's generous.
Yeah, who he really trusts. And now you could put numbers out there, but I think if we did a proper analysis of the numbers and went, okay, but Fabio Vieira might have got some minutes here, but during crunch time, when we were trying to win a match, 2-0 down against Aston Villa, who was he bringing on? And I feel like we always end up in that situation. So, I mean, thoughts on that, and if that's fair necessarily, but also how we kind of address that. Is it simply layering on talent? Because I also think there's a slight letting go thing from Mikel that we need to talk about.
No, it's been one of my loudest critiques on here. I mean, I don't critique Mikel often, but I do critique him with the squad management, and I will maintain my point, Emile Smith-Rowe. The one point, and I hate to keep bringing him into it, but he's the only one that fits your description, Alex. He was given a chance in the run-in, by the way. He gets a man-of-the-match performance, and then ice. I keep asking that question. What message does that send to the 15th player in the squad? Like, when you're asking in order for us to trust and have it, by the way, Mikel gave it. So, kudos. I was ecstatic to see him. And by the way, Luton was still important. I know it was a game that we all expected to win, but it was in the run-in and it was crunch time, right? He performs. He doesn't just perform and do okay. He's man of the match.
Showed a new aspect to himself as well.
He shows a new aspect to himself. He brings something that I think a lot of fans have questioned whether or not he has. And then ice. And then 0 minutes. And then we don't get to see him. Despite Martin Odegaard looking like he's dead on his legs pretty much in every game since Luton in the run-in and couldn't have had 20 minutes. Really? Even as a break? To give us a different dynamic? Even when we were struggling, by the way, against Villa, bringing him on, the lateness that he did, in terms of, after you've already given faith, he's already repaid the faith. And I think that's part of the problem, mate. Like, it's not just sentimentality, because I think he's always going to be a coach for me that has a plan A. When plan A doesn't go, he will struggle. I think his ability to adapt is an issue, but his ability to recognize that he needs to adapt is top. And that's the most frustrating thing for me. And the reason I say that is because at the end of every season, or at the end of every achievement we've lost, what has Mikel done? The exact configuration that fans and other people would have wanted to see, but he does it too late. So there's a part of me that says, okay, you're not stupid. You don't lack the intellect. You don't lack the knowledge. You don't lack the awareness to see it's a problem. But you're not doing it as fast as I want. You're not doing it as fast as I would hope to maybe take the team forward. And I think that's experience, if I'm really being fair. I mean, how many times in our lives have we been able to relate to the same thing at different points in our life? So, I mean, some of it is experience, but I will maintain I'm going to be a lot harsher, mate. I'm going to be a lot harsher. And I don't buy this idea that, if you're not using them, sell them. Honestly, I'm kind of getting fed up to the point of being told how important a player is. And I can see he's important, by the way. It's not that I think Mikel's lying. Also, I don't think it's like that. It's not that simple. But there needs to be better evidence for Mikel's use of the squad. And it can't, I look at Eddie Nketiah as another one who clearly is somebody that he's trusted and always had faith in. Probably more faith than most managers would. Also, I might add. But to go from the period in the beginning of the season where he's had a couple months where he was important and he was scoring goals, from Eddie's perspective to not starting in 2024, not getting minutes really in 2024, like there needs to be room for debate here, in my opinion.
Bhavs, I want to come to some individual cases because George has raised the one with Emile Smith-Rowe, but I'd probably, and let me know whether you feel this is fair, I think in this conversation, maybe, are Reece Nelson, I would say Eddie. You could maybe argue Gabby Jesus, but I think there's a lot of caveats around that one. You could look at Martinelli, but again, a lot of caveats around that one. I think Fabio Vieira's in that conversation, and I think Smith-Rowe's in that conversation. And Tommy Zinchenko. And maybe Zinchenko as well, possibly. But again, I think there's more caveats around those. There's the Reeses and the Eddies. They're the ones that are really kind of the question marks because he's given them contracts.
Yeah, give them contracts. And I think the likes of Emile and Fabio and people like that, they get injured a lot. So you can say, okay, they're never quite fit enough to get a run in the team. Reece and Eddie have been basically always available, and not trusted enough. And I think you're right. If you're going to give them contracts and give them massive contracts as well, they're both earning over £100,000 a week. You have to give them chances. You have to, show why you gave it to them. Because at one point, the club going to go, look, we trusted you and your decision to keep them and rewarded them with massive contracts, and you're not playing them enough. And ultimately, even though the asset is going obviously higher because we give them a contract from zero, still in terms of selling them going forward, it's going to be difficult. I think Eddie was still going to go, but 100k a week, some clubs might not be willing to offer that for a player that's not playing minutes for Arsenal. We're not seen as a player part of the first team. I think the one benefit Arsenal have now is the fact that we are fighting for titles again, and when you're doing that, your players automatically rise in value because teams go, okay, look, these players here can be a part of a squad that fighting for a title, and we've seen it in the past with the likes of Liverpool and City. But look, I agree. I don't feel like we're utilising the players well enough, but also giving clarity, even to just us as fans going, look, this is my plan with Eddie. I see him a part of the first team. I don't see him part of the first team. It's like we see Smith-Rowe, we don't see him for like another 3-4 weeks. We see Vieira, we don't see him for 3-4 weeks. They just disappear. And I think that's why as fans we get a bit confused and we start to have these little debates of what's going to happen with this player and that player, and start to do videos and stuff. But I think a lot of it is just Mikel not giving enough clarity in press conferences, or just with his actions of going, look, I love Emile. He's amazing.
It's clarity of action as opposed to messaging. Yeah. Because he's really clear in how he likes him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Fabio is amazing. He's got great partnership with Martinelli. He never plays him. That's where it gets confusing. Kivio's going to change the way we play. Barely played him.
That was a fake quote, by the way.
Okay.
Fake quote. Someone misquoted. It's so funny how that happened because I remember thinking that, and I basically Arsenal.com misheard something. They basically wrote something that he said in the press conference. You know, when they transcribe what he said, and he didn't say it. He said something slightly different. It's really interesting. But Kivior's another one. You know, so I will push back slightly, George, and say that I think the messaging, the clarity of action is the most important, but I do think there is a messaging issue with some cases. I would look at Reece and Fabio specifically. It also could be partly, you know, what gets asked in the press conference. You can't cover all bases. You know, you're in a title race, you're going to be asked about that. I completely get it. But I think I said this on our Keep Sell Loan that we did for patrons and YouTube members that you can check out. And plug. And I think I said about Fabio, part of the issue is that it feels like we don't get the messaging right. And it reminds me of the Saliba situation. You can like a player, not like a player. I actually, you know, I'll have my opinions, you have yours. But when you leave a gap, when there's no messaging, supposedly, although someone did tell me that he said something in a Porto press conference, I could be wrong here. But when you leave enough of a gap, fans naturally are going to fill that and go, well, this is happening, that's happening. So let's talk solutions. And George, I'll come back to you now. I think part of it is messaging, which we've discussed. But how does he? Is it simply just layering on more talent and hopefully, you know,
PSV,
fixing the issue? Because it feels like that's not the only answer.
Okay, PSV 5-0 up. Why is Ethan not on? Why is Mario Cozier-Dewberry not brought to give Saka rest? Like
you all laughed at me on the instant reaction. You all laughed at me.
I mean, there's examples. I can give you other examples. You know, I think Everton. You know, I think back at in the run-in. I keep looking at Saka. I keep looking at, you know, Rice. I keep looking at other areas in our squad. William Saliba playing every single minute of the Arsenal campaign, and fans celebrating that is not something that I'm with. I think that's really worrying, by the way. You know, having people that I think there was one graphic, by the way, mate. Like, I know you were saying like we need to have figures. There was one graphic that I saw that listed kind of the amount of players that played a percentage of available Premier League minutes. And I think Arsenal had something like 8 players that played above 80% or more of minutes. And I remember having a big debate, you know, online with it. And I was not happy.
You? Surely
not. Me. Surely not. But I was having a big debate about comparing it to City and Liverpool, who had something like 2 at that point. And I remember saying, this is not good, guys. And a lot of people were saying, no, this is good because that means your best players are playing. And I remember sitting there saying, no, actually it's bad because in my opinion, it means that you're overburdening the same players again and again. It's not that your best players are available because in City and in Liverpool, their best players, except for Liverpool, I think they've had a lot of injuries, but City, they had a lot of players available. And the beauty is they rotate. The beauty of that was the rotation. Look, I just think it boils down to Mikel. This is a fancy way of saying play and, you know, manage the squad better, really simply. I think there's certain players that need to be cut. There are fringes. We need to do that. There is inefficiency in the squad. But I'll pose this question. I'd love for either you, Bhavs, or, you know, Alex to answer this. Let's say we bought, insert your favorite superstar here. I don't want to get caught in the weeds on names because people forget the question. But let's buy a superstar center forward. Do you guys trust that Martinelli gets worked in the same way if he's not playing? Say he's the sacrifice. I'm using Martinelli because that is a universally accepted superstar that everybody loves. And I'm doing it on purpose to you, Alex. But he's clearly talented. Maybe you think he's a big sale. He's clearly talented.
He's useful in the squad,
yes.
Let's be clear. Yeah.
So do you trust Mikel to use him if we were to buy a superstar to do it?
Honestly, no. And the thing is as well is I often feel it's almost like once a player has shown Mikel that he's maybe not exactly what he wants, it feels like sometimes
he Toy Stories them.
Yeah, it's almost just like, no, that's it. And I universally don't trust you. And I think someone like a Martinelli, and you know, look, we can't have the conversation we have for the first half of the pod. We want to be Madrid, and then divorce it from this. You know, we have to be ruthless with players and talent.
I think it's different too,
and that's fine. But exactly, but this is different. It's about using what you have within a season. You know, once the summer rolls around, yeah, let's be ruthless with players. But when you're in a season, when you have a group of players and you can see that there's deficiencies as well, then I think it's worth doing. But Bhavs, I don't want to lock you out.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of it comes down to fear. I feel like because he's, look, this is still his first ever job, and he's fighting for a title against a really good manager, right? When you're doing that,
Yeah,
you're
it's
very
quite-
scared to change things that are working. And you look at the second half of last season, we won literally every single game. And so Mikel's probably going, look, we're getting there, we're getting results, and we're trying as fans to be proactive and go, look, we can see this as a potential issue. He doesn't see it as an issue right now. And of course, as a manager, you need to be proactive. But I feel like a lot of it right now is he's very scared to change things around in the business end of the season, because he's like, look, if I change it and it makes a mistake and you know, it goes wrong, then as fans, we'll be the first one going, oh, why do you make that sub? But also, you know, I think he's going to go like, I've cost myself a title race. So I think a lot of it is just a fear. A lot of, like, I don't think he's superstitious, but I think he's very scared to change things if they work. And we see often when a team wins, he keeps the same team again and again and again until something goes wrong.
Can I pose one thing? You know what part of the frustration is for this entire conversation for some fans, regardless if you like certain fringe players or not? The freedom and scope he's given to Kai Havertz and David Raya this season to go through their issues is part of the problem for me. There is certain unwavering trust in certain players that he's got, with a willingness to work through issues that isn't applied to general players throughout the squad. And I think that that's part of the frustration, because at some point, for the first 6 months of the season, Kai Havertz, you can't say, or shouldn't say, that he was an undisputed starter. If you're talking about meritocracy, I don't think Kai Havertz really started performing until 2024. He had moments of really good brilliance, but on the whole, and we can talk about role, we can talk about context, but then that same logic should be applied to every single fringe player that you're talking about. You can go through Eddie, you can go through Reece, you can go through Emile, you can go through Vieira. At some point, they had trust. At some point, they were performing, and then they're not. So there needs to be a better balance, in my opinion, about the trusted group, and defining what that means, in my opinion, I think is very important.
I think that is important, and I think it's important because it allows us to not have moments like we did against Aston Villa, where clearly physically we were dropping off. It allows us to find different solutions. I think there's a lot of reasons why having a squad is important. However, just playing devil's advocate for a second, we just hit 8 to 9 points, and the manager's improved as year on year on year. Is it not? I mean, some fans would argue, Bhavs, that, you know, basically, well, if he's winning, forget it. That's his job. His job as a manager is not to include someone who doesn't want to include. His job as a manager is not necessarily to, you know, his primary job is to win football matches. So could you make an argument that, yes, you know, I take George's point in terms of that, and I'm not necessarily saying I agree with what I'm saying. I take George's point about, you know, pushing through with Havertz versus not pushing through with other players, but is that not his want as a manager? Is it he's allowed to do that?
Yeah, of course.
Especially with a new player, you know, someone who he's backing, right?
Yeah, of course he is. And I think with Havertz and Raya, he probably sees those issues as things he can work through. And I think the reason why Ramsdale got moved on and other players have kind of been trusted less and less is because he probably sees things that he can't fix. And he goes, I don't want to, you know, waste time.
Because he gets the ick
player.
with certain players,
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
yeah, it's like once he sees the thing that he can't change, he sees the cap, he goes, don't fancy that. See you later. Right, and look, it worked for him. That's why every single year Arsenal are getting better. They'll go from 84 points last year to 89 this year, and probably go towards 90 next year. So, you know, that ruthless nature has worked for him. And if it hadn't worked out, we were talking about it in a negative manner. But, you know, I think as fans right now, we're thinking of maybe at times worst case scenarios of what if an injury happens. And thankfully it hasn't happened so far. And I think as fans, we're right to have that, you know, as a concern. But I think for Mikel, it's a little thing to add. I don't think it's a major flaw I see in his game. I don't think he can add it to his game. And I think like we saw last year, there's little things we wanted last year, we start getting this year. I think next year will be the same case. We'll see more rotations, we'll maybe see more youngsters playing involved, and it won't be perfect, and there will always be one thing Mikel misses. You know, I don't think any manager is perfect. I think if you even ask City fans about Pep, they go, oh, he lacks this and lacks that, even though he's got basically everything. Maybe hair follicles, but apart from that, I think he's got everything else. And so, yeah, I think in terms of Mikel, it's just little things as fans that we're probably looking as worst case scenarios. And no, he's had my trust, you know, and I trust that he'll learn the little things that we ask from him as well.
Yeah. And this is the thing, is any critique of Mikel, I think sometimes you get people to go, why are you critiquing the manager who's got us? It's like, well, otherwise we just wouldn't ever say anything negative. It's like you can critique someone.
There would be zero commentary.
Do you know what I mean? Like you can critique someone while also understanding they're doing a brilliant job. It's just, you know, these are the extra percentage.
It's marginal gains. It's marginal gains.
It's tiny percentages.
And if we're willing to have a conversation about David Raya or over Aaron Ramsdale as an analogy, then we should be willing to have a conversation over the fringe. And I think the next step, by the way, in terms of securing a trophy, is this idea of having a squad of 15 that you trust. I do think that's important. And I think I have a couple rules that I'll end on with this, where I believe that if you're not willing to trust a squad member, they should be sold and reinvested. And the fund allocation should be towards players that you trust. Your wages that you pay for certain players should reflect their importance in the team. I don't think that Gabby Jesus should be on $265K a week if he's not going to be playing every single game that he's available, rain or shine. And if there's zero doubt, you shouldn't be in the bracket of $250K a week or above. I do believe that we need to make earlier decisions on players and on youth. I believe that if you don't believe that they have the talent, and you know better than anybody being in the room, that Ruel maybe might not make it, or you're not sure, send him on loan. Get experience, build the value, and if he doesn't come back, I find it absolutely ridiculous that Amari Hutchison is the one giving Chelsea £20 million of profit and not Arsenal.
We should be getting that.
And we should be getting that. So those are three things that I think are very fair. Now, removing the name debates from it as rules that the squad should manage for effective fund allocation.
So you hate Mikel Arteta and you hate Arsenal.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's what I'm here for. Me
Just
and Lee
quickly
are tight.
before we move on, yes, we'll talk about Osimhen. Before we move on to Osimhen to close the show, what would be, let's pick a name. And let's pick Ethan Nwaneri, because there was a number of players we wanted to talk about, maybe. But let's just talk Ethan. Maybe Miles, if you want to talk about him, George, fine.
He played for the U18s and starred, just saying.
What is a successful season, integration-wise, for Ethan from this point? What do you think, Bhavs?
I think it's minutes. Because last year,
yes,
he had very few minutes, right? So maybe even a start. Maybe even a start.
2 minutes?
I'm not saying in
3 minutes.
Yeah, I think maybe 5 minutes next year off the bench. I'll take that. But I think ultimately it's trust as well. To go, look, in a certain game, where we saw it with Klopp. It was in a game at the Emirates in the FA Cup, where the game was at 1-0 or 0-0, and he brought on two youngsters and he won the game with us. So it's trust in those moments where the game's not decided, I'm able to bring you on because I feel like your profile is exactly what we need. And I think, especially if you look at Ethan Nwaneri's profile, it's something that the squad needs at times, that tight little play in spaces. And I think in certain game states, obviously I know he's still very young, but I think that will be the case of, it might be a game where he's the exact player we need, and he might be a bit young, but if he can come off the bench and even have like a bit of an impact, I think that will be the moment Mikel goes, that this guy's a part of my actual first team squad, and not just a part of we're 5-0 up, we can bring him on now because there's no risk whatsoever.
Yeah, I think there's a level of trust. However, I'm gonna push you off the fence. Minutes wise, if I give you his minutes from last season, just getting those stats up now. Minutes wise, what we're thinking would be that would be a successful season for Ethan Nwaneri. So last season he got, where is he? Here he is. He got 13 minutes in all comps.
13 minutes. I'm looking at least at a 90. I'm looking at probably plus 200 at least. Plus 200 at least. I think a lot of it off the bench as well, but maybe even the odd start. Maybe the odd start in the Carabao Cup. To see him in action from the get-go, where the game is at 0-0, and it's not just him coming on when it's 2-0 and 3-0 and 4-0. Just see him how he is in games just like that, because we saw him against West Ham, we were like 6-0 up, and he looked amazing, but we're 6-0 up, so it's not the same.
In fairness, George, I think he would have started that game against Brentford.
He was sick.
Yeah, but he was unwell.
Yeah, we did see someone else starting it.
Minutes-wise, Sergio Jr. got more minutes than Nwaneri last season. Minutes-wise, George, what are we thinking for next season?
I think that he needs to have cup competitions. I'm not one to hold my words. I'll tell you. I think he has to start at minimum 500 minutes next year. Minimum 500. Let's analyze something. Actually, let me throw it back on you as well. How much do you rate Ethan Nwaneri's talent in comparison to Bukayo Saka when he broke on the scene with Unai Emery? Would you say that he is comparable, or do you think he was talked about in the same way?
It's in the same ballpark. Until I see more minutes, I just can't compare it. But as in
narrative, at least.
If we're sat here in 5 years and
got more hype,
we're talking about Ashley Cole, Bukayo Saka, Nwaneri in that sort of maybe that's a possibility. Let's say. Not
ceiling. I was just thinking like narrative. Like I would argue, I'm with Bhavs. I think Ethan has more hype than Bukayo did at the same time. For God's sakes, he's been the youngest player that we've played in the Premier League.
Yeah, maybe.
And what do you think? Does anybody know actually Bukayo Saka's first kind of Premier League campaign, which was
I can also use
2019.
Transfermarkt. So come on, tell us.
So it was 1,753 minutes, guys.
In that breakout season.
In that breakout season.
That was under Unai Emery, wasn't it?
Yep. In the Premier League, guys. Matches played.
Yeah, I remember his debut. I
mean, in fairness, we were crap.
Sure.
He started, to be fair, he had that start against was it Karabakh? I was at the game. I remember watching him, and he was really good. Playing on, I think it was a left winger. And I think that's when he caught everyone's eyes.
Absolutely. And we were really poor. No problem. That's context. So let's divide that by 3. Guess what you get? Minimum 500 minutes.
No, I hear you.
And so it gets to a point. And the one thing that I will say is I think that Ethan and Fabio Vieira can't coexist in a squad, ultimately. I think that within the next 18 months, one will live while the other it doesn't. and I do feel like they push a question. And I think as we're sitting there
who's
talking,
Voldemort and who's Harry?
Well, I'll let you decide, the viewers. But I do think that we need to look at minimum. It's cup competitions. At minimum, it's 20, 30 minutes in a Premier League game. I need to see at least 4 or 5 games in the Premier League where Ethan Nwaneri plays. There's no question on his talent, by the way. He just exited arguably the MVP of England for the U17 World Cup. I know people will shout Mikey Moore, but Ethan, if you watch that tournament, Ethan was running everything in that team. And you know, I don't think it's a talent. You can't sit there and tell me it's a talent question when I've got arguably the MVP of England in a star-studded lineup of the U17 World Cup not getting minutes. And by the way, Mikey Moore is going to be the same at Tottenham. Those are equal level talents, and they're going to be, but guess what? I trust Ange to do it more than I do Mikel. And
by the way, we're also talking about Ødegaard and Saka, and everyone's going, we need a backup. We need a backup.
The thing is with Ethan Nwaneri, we talk about like his age mate. So Endrick's the same age, right? And we got the likes of, was it Zayn Emery as well, right? Playing for PSG. This is the level of talent Nwaneri's in. Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure
Zaire Emery.
Zayn Malik from One Direction.
I call him WZE.
yeah. But look, he's also 17, 16, similar age to Ethan. So his age mates are making, steps in towards the first team. And I think Nwaneri's in that similar pool. As the hype of English talents right now, I can't think of another 17-year-old that's got as much hype as Nwaneri has. And so with that, we talk about Arsenal going to Brazil and signing that next big star from Brazil. We've got one in England. We've got the one in England, and you've got to give him minutes then. Because, that guy, if we don't give him minutes, he will look for a move away. And I think Arsenal fans in the past have seen it, we see it with Charlie Patino a couple of years ago. He was the best talent to come through Hell-End, and now I think it's a leave. So I know with Ethan Nwaneri next year, I want him to be like our Phil Foden, in the sense of, he's not going to go on loan. He's going to stay at Arsenal and just slowly break into the first team and have that breakthrough year and hopefully get all the awards.
Yeah, I think I spoke about this in a recent Different Not video, but I watched a round table of Alex Inglethorpe, who's Liverpool's youth academy manager, and I love the way he spoke. And he was talking a lot about how the players surprise you once you give them. You can't tell until you give them an opportunity. You don't know. You don't have all the answers as a youth academy sort of manager. So I hope that mentality is kind of seeping through at Arsenal.
And to be fair, I just wanted to be fair because you mentioned Phil Foden. This was the pathway of Phil Foden, right? He gets 50 minutes. He gets 50 minutes in his first year with the Premier League, which you could argue this was Ethan's 50 minutes, right? The next year he gets 335, then 901, then 1,600, then 2,000, 2,000, 3,000. So you could make a case for progressive increases. I think we're at the 300, 500 minute season. Mark. Yeah, okay. We need to see that.
Okay. Let's talk about so George. I know you don't know this player, but basically he's this Nigerian striker who plays for Napoli under Antonio. By the way, Antonio Conte in Serie A under De Laurentiis is
with no Europe.
Have you ever heard of a more
guaranteed
set to blow kind of situation?
You find that crazy, by the way. The fact that they won the league the year before, finished 10th.
There was so many issues
with Victor Osimhen as well, of all people.
There was so many issues with that squad, and I mean, even I think Victor also had like injuries himself in that team. But regardless, yeah, I mean, he's potentially going to PSG. I mean, I have probably a lot to say on the positives of the player,
so when it comes to Bhavs,
I was going to throw it back to you guys. What do you think that Victor Osimhen needs to work on? Why is he not appreciated it? And why does the timeline feel he's a bad player now? I would love to know, because genuinely the switch that I've seen from 6 to 8 months ago has been incredible.
You know how I feel about online narratives. It's normally like one or two people in their bedrooms. I think it's very
it's worse though. It's common.
No.
If you look at all the comments, people don't like him. Like when you see the links at it, there's a general consensus. I'm not talking the one or two trolls.
A lot of his came actually. It was after AFCON.
It was
sure,
after
a lot of fans
AFCON.
watched AFCON and he missed a few chances, didn't score a few goals.
It was the first time they saw him.
And they look. Arsenal fans want the perfect striker. He drifts out wide. He scores every single chance he gets. He can't miss a single chance, by the way. Right? He scores headers. He scores bicycle kicks. He scores scorpion kicks. He scores everything, and that doesn't exist, right? Even in terms of Erling Haaland, he misses so many chances. So I think Arsenal fans seeing Osimhen like that vulnerable aspect of him missing chances and not being that perfect one chance, one goal striker, which doesn't exist, by the way. I think that's what kind of they're like, oh, well, we don't want him if he's not that. And also, for me, it's a lot of if we're going to spend £100 million on a player, a lot of fans are like, or maybe not £100 million, but they're going to have the main investment as a midfielder over a striker. I think they don't want to have it as if we sign an Osimhen, we can't sign a big midfielder as well. Why? And that holds us back next year. I don't know. That's the way. Just talking to fans, because I know Alex talked about online consensus and the narrative online, but even in person, just talking about strikers, no one's talking about Osimhen. You know, people come up to me as an Arsenal, they go, "Who you want to sign?" No one goes, "Do you want to sign Osimhen?" They go, "Isak," or they go, "Do you want to sign Šeško instead?" So a lot of it, I think, is fans is probably finances, and we're becoming accountant at this point of the club and going, "Look, we want a midfielder first," and you get obviously names like Bruno Guimaraes, people like that.
You guys know how I feel about online narratives. People who don't live in their mum's basement, I think, like Victor Osimhen. I'm sure there is a bit of a pushback against him, but it's for me, it's such a small minority that it doesn't really register. I think with Osimhen, for me, there's three players on the market who represent potential. When we're looking for our De Bruyne, our Salah, our whatever in that position, there's three players on the market, and that's Rashford, Leao, and Osimhen. And you might dislike, whatever, but he is, for me, in the three of where you go. And, you know, finances, we could talk about Leao's release clause, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. But in terms of on the market, available players who seem could do the job, those are the three. Osimhen, George, I remember I was scouting him for a video ages ago. I remember talking about him slightly overcooking his passes a little bit. I think we spoke about some of his work outside the box. But other than that, in terms of a box presence, because we did this scouting for Šeško, what I see of him is exactly it's plugging the hole of what Arsenal need so securely and so perfectly that I think if this is even a sniff of being able to do this, you go and do it. Look, I've spoken about this before. Every single player that is going to come up is going to have question marks. There is probably we even say Declan Rice was a surefire. I remember the summer of 2023.
Caicedo was more preferred.
Caicedo was preferred, and people were saying Rice can't pass, progressive pass, he can't turn, all that sort of stuff. There is always question marks. And what happens is people go, I'm sorry to repeat this point, but it's so true. People will hear a player and they go, no, because of this. And you go, okay, that's fine. But show me the 50,000 other players who are perfect with no problems. There aren't any. So what do you want your problem to be? Osimhen, a little bit of out-of-the-box work, question marks about a little bit of his link-up. Okay, well, but what he's so good at is exactly what we need. So I'm also, I would be happy with Leao in different ways. I'd be happy with Rashford. I think probably Osimhen, I don't know, financially. But for me, I think we will do some scouting on Osimhen probably at some point. So stay tuned for that. But he's one of the three that I look at and go, that is one of the potential superstars available this summer.
I can name you, and I'm not going to go too big because I would love to save that for scouting, not to like gatekeep, but we're going to do a breakdown on him. It's a player I really like. I would love for people to check out this Benjamin Sesko work that we did, because I think it lays clear about deficiencies. And I think the ultimate point was, Šeško is the best prospect on the market, but do Arsenal go prospect in a position that they need right now? You look at Victor Osimhen, and I see 5 specific plays. I can tell you right now, he scores 5 goals minimum in set pieces, 5 goals, cutbacks, 5 goals, half space crossing, whether it's Bukayo Saka at the back post, Martin Odegaard,
given the
5 goals. It's just through the ball channels from a Martin Odegaard reverse pass, by the way. Like exactly what we saw with Martinelli at Everton in the last game of the season. 5 goals. I think that there are definitely things to improve. He's not the perfect player, but in terms of being the most humble marquee superstar on the market, checks that box. Out of possession, there's zero worries. He is the hardest working striker in the world. In terms of also feasibility, I would argue he's probably the most feasible one. The release clause, yes, it's big, but it's not as big as Leao's, who's 150 million euros. It's not as big as a Marcus Rashford, who's on 375k a week. You're talking about assuming
depends who you ask, but he would be our biggest. He would be our highest
350.
Earner. He'd be our highest earner.
300. He would be the highest earner by a margin. And you're assuming he's going to move the biggest club in, like one of the bigger clubs in the world, to one of the other bigger clubs in the world and take a pay cut? I've never seen that before. Never. And so it would, like, the assumptions on it, you would have to assume the feasibility is something you've never seen. And look, Victor Osimhen's going to demand 350k a week, by the way. He's not going to be cheap. But I'm tired of us being accountants in the one area that we really need to progress. And I think if I'm beating Pep, I want a guarantee. And I'm telling you right now, I want a man in terms of the attack, and I want somebody that gives me a level of comfortability that in the final third, you're going to dominate your area. And I actually can't say that about anybody but Bukayo Saka in the front line. I think for all of Kai Havertz benefits, Martinelli benefits, Trossard benefits, there's no one that I look at that I say, I'm confident that you're going to dominate that zone. You will win the battle. You may not get the outcome that you want, but you'll win the battle. I'm happy with Saka, but that's the only player.
It's so true. And Bhavs, before I come to you just quickly, the wages thing is so key. People are like, but he's going to be on 300. Okay. Do you want to, if you're saying about wages right now, just answer me these two questions. Do you want to compete with Real Madrid, Bayern and City? The answer is yes. They have, I think Bayern Munich have like 8 players on over 300k a week. I think Real Madrid have something like 6. I think Man City have 4.
Players.
Yep. Have a look on, according to Capology.
Crazy.
And even if they've
It's
wildly overestimated, they have players on over 300k. You can't simultaneously want us to compete with Bayern and Real Madrid and whatever, and also share the opinion that we can't put players on 300k a week. If you say, I don't want players on 300k a week, absolutely fine, but you can't expect us to compete.
No. I think as fans, we still look at ourselves as the underdogs. Because for
It's
so
kind
long,
of, it's kind of what we were saying earlier about Madrid
Yeah.
and this mentality shift.
They aren't the underdogs. They expect to win. And as Arsenal fans, we're just like, oh, we're here now. It's good to be here again. And I think, look, a lot of it is the fact that we weren't competing for a while. So it is, you can't go from not competing to just, I won't guarantee success. But I think it's going to be now just getting over the line, and after that, how we demand success after that. We want more titles, we want more, and we're hungry for that. In terms of Osimhen and the player himself, look, I agree with a lot of things you say. I think when you watch Man City play, like obviously towards the end of last season, and you're watching them trying to drop points, and you just know at one point the commentator's going to go, Haaland, we know it's just going to happen, and it happens every single game. We don't have that player. And you're right, Saka doesn't do it as much because he's not a goal scorer like that. He's a lot more than that, and neither is Odegaard, and Havertz is, again, he's getting there, but Osimhen will be that type of player. You could just imagine the commentator saying his name every single game because he just guarantees you a goal at least, or at least the chance and the chaos he causes. And if we've seen how Havertz can cause issues to this team, imagine getting an actual striker who's used to doing it consistently and has scored more goals. It's a bit more clinical and a bit more natural in the air as well. It'd be different levels, and we've got the option of Havertz up front as well now as an option, but he can play alongside him. And I do wonder how they work as a partnership, because if you've given Kai right now, who's the highest. Exactly. And he's the highest earner at the club right now, Havertz. So if you can have Osimhen and Havertz play together, and he can play in different roles as well. And we saw it in the game against Villa where we obviously lost 2-0. Havertz was actually playing on the left side. He did pretty well. A lot of people think he had a poor game there because we lost the game. But playing alongside Osimhen, I think it really could elevate his game even more.
We did a tactics video talking about Šeško, whatever his name is, with Havertz and how that would work. And I think, basically imagine that times 2 with Osimhen. We'll have to finish there, but we will be back for our main podcast again next Monday. We're going to put a scouting video out about Yusuf Fofana, probably midweek at some point, and then we're also going to do a rip-off of the Arsenal, our own definitely brand new idea, where I think we're going to do some kind of director of football type thing where we really sort of iron out the window for patrons and YouTube members. If you choose to sign up, thank you so much. If not, no problem. We love you anyway for being here. Thanks so much, guys. Good chat, good vibes, good football, Arsenal Football Club. Here you go. Thanks always for listening. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.